In Baye, a small farming village, the motorcycles are several meters long and carry men and goods to Bafoussam, the region's main city located about 15 kilometers away. These motorcycles are a godsend for the farmers who live in villages where the roads are impassable for other vehicles. Laden with 8 people, the vehicle heads down the dirt road, turning the heads of everyone it passes. 8 up is hardly a big number for a truck or even a car in Western Cameroon, but this is no ordinary form of transport. The head turner is a giant motorcycle, an outrageously customized Leviathan more than 3 meters of 10 feet long that has been specially adapted to meet a gap in Cameroon's transport market. And to something that gives a focus on the conversation of the day. With the COVID-19 pandemic straining finances, the Shylock business has started to flourish in Kisauni, one of the low-income neighborhoods of Mombasa County. A number of residents there have been forced to borrow money to make ends meet and are using their property as collateral. And as NTV's Kevin Mutai reports, some have lost their belongings for defaulting on the loans.
Along the Mishomoroni Road towards Bamburi in Mombasa County is one of the areas where the Shylock business is looming. Locals here are using their belongings to secure loans from Shylocks due to the current financial constraints. Most of the household items being used as collateral include televisions, sofa sets, dining tables, among others.
Watu wanalemewa sana na maisha. Unapata mtu anakuja na kuambia nimepata shida fulani, kuna mgonjwa wangu fulani. Sasa unapata vitu watu wanavileta kwa wingi sana kwa sababu anataka ile pesa.
Nataka kula, sina nini, kule nilikuwa nikifanya hotelini. Kule nilikuwa nafanya hotelini nikaambiwa kazi iko chini.
The coronavirus pandemic wiped out many businesses as well as jobs, forcing residents to seek alternative financial assistance in order to fend for their families. This has, however, become a thorn in the flesh for many borrowers who end up not recovering their items for failing to repay the loans, which are also burdening with huge interest rates.
Nyumba nzima iko na TV, iko na stand ya TV, iko na coffee table, iko na makochi majilist, iko na vitanda, iko na dining table, iko na mattress, yani utakuja ufagie kila kitu. Around 60,000.
Ngana ile pesa nilichukua, wakaniambia nimalize wiki 3 waniregesha hiyo pamoja na profit yao. Sasa kulingana na hiyo profit nilishindwa kupata hata ile interest yao ya kuregesha. Sasa ikabidi hiyo TV kaenda hivyo.
Nimekupatia 10,000, umenipatia 49 inches TV. Halafu umekuja nimeuza. Utafili vipi? So hapo ndo kuna uhasama unaingia. Hata kama ni urafiki unavunjika. Bana yule aliuza TV yangu bana. Aliuza TV yangu, so inakuwa ni lawama. So ni mitihani tunapata katika rehani. Sasa tuna raha.
Some Kenyans have become prisoners of borrowing, with many being pushed to the situation because of the hardships in life, debts, or even to maintain the lifestyle. Reports also indicate that the penetration of mobile loan platforms have made Kenyans access loans running into billions of shillings. And due to the rising pressure, most of the Shylocks here are now lending money with goods that are on high demand.
Watu wamekuwa ni wengi, wataka kuuza vitu zao. Mara zingine waweza kutoa pesa mpaka ukamaliza kabisa. Lakini mteja hawezi kuja kwa duka na ukamwambia bana hauna pesa. So inabidi ungangane, umtafutie hata kama ni kukopa pesa, umsaidie kwa sababu yeye anajua katika mind yake mimi nikienda kwa mtu fulani ama nikienda rahani nitasaidia.
Kumekuwa na ungumu wa maisha. Watu hawapati, wenye walikuwa wanasafiri kama kutoka Nairobi wanachukua mitumba wanauza hapa Mombasa, hakuna usafiri tena. Kumekuwa kungumu mpaka mtu anaona afadhali auze kitanda alale chini.
If the hardship continues, most of the residents here are worried that they might lose all their belongings to Shylocks as it is the cheaply available source of money. Kevin Mutai, NTV in Mombasa.
Well, that story actually paints the picture in as far as our current circumstances, and especially for most that have lost their sources of income or their livelihoods. But the truth of the matter is the relationship with money, or the conversation around money, is one that has been heard for a long time, even before the pandemic hit us. So it brings to the question, how come there are some people who seem to have, kept or rode this tide, kept their heads above water, yet they lost their sources of income, and they also lost their jobs. So what exactly did they do right? What's the secret behind their success today? We take a look at that and much more. And to help us understand that, we have Christine Gadhiwini, who is a financial consultant, to help us along with this conversation. And it is so important that we relook, even as we think about COVID and everything else, relook at our financial health. Why so?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Finances are part and parcel of our lives, so we must engage intentionally and just try and make the best of every situation. So yes, just like your physical health, we also need to look at our financial health.
Yes. And I remember this story you once told. How well can you sleep on a windy night would actually equate to your financial health today. Share with us.
Okay, so it's a story from a bedtime story for children that was written by Arthur C. Maxwell many, many years ago. So it's a story of a farmer who's looking for an employee to help him with his cows, sheep, and everything he has on his ranch. And a young boy comes and interviews for the job. And at the end of the interview, the boy keeps repeating that he can sleep well on windy nights. So the farmer wonders, what does that mean? And the boy keeps repeating this statement over and over again. And he just decides to give the boy a chance. And then 3 days later, there's actually a storm. And the farmer wakes up in a rush because he can hear the wind, he can hear things happening, and he has horses as well, he has cows, he has sheep, so he's worried about his animals. And he goes to check on the boy, and sure enough, the boy is fast asleep. So he gets so annoyed, he panics, and he rushes to check. He checks on the sheep, he finds they've been boarded up, they are fine, they are calm, they are even very warm. He goes, he checks the cows, the same thing. Now he's very worried because he knows horses panic, they bolt out of the stables, and they rush out. He goes and checks on the stables, the horses are fine. And then he remembers the boy's statement that he can sleep well on windy nights. So the boy had taken care of everything ahead of the storm. So in terms of financial health, how well can we sleep in the pandemic, in the lockdown, in recession, during hard seasons? How well can we sleep on our windy nights?
That is such a good idea of why it is important for us to have this conversation and keep, rethinking about your relationship with money, because such storms will always come your way, but it's those that actually prepare for such that ride the tide. And speaking of which, what have you seen, or who have you seen will be able to ride the tide in such circumstances?
It's people who are able to pivot, who are able to be flexible, who are able to see that things have now changed. For some, it has meant closing down their offices, closing down their shops, because those are overheads they can't afford anymore. For some, it means moving completely online, selling their wares online, doing courses online. So it's someone who is able to pivot and see that it's a season, but I have to be able to ride the wave during this season. Yes.
Okay, and speaking of which, they speak of money personalities, which to a large extent informs how people relate to monies. Tell us more.
So money personalities comes from, one, how you are socialized growing up as a child, in the family, how money was used or how money was spoken about. So those are the dynamics that bring about money personality. And for others, it's the total opposite of that. You grow up feeling a certain way about money. Maybe you're very conservative with money, and then you grow up and you become very extravagant and adventurous. So those personalities dictate our relationship with money. It can be a negative or a positive relationship. It can even be a toxic relationship with money.
Okay,
Yeah.
What do you mean toxic?
Toxic would mean that instead of looking at money as a tool, you either look at it as your identity and therefore you're always looking at getting money from any source, by any means, even illegal means, so that could be a toxic relationship with money.
Okay, so now Kenyans are always told for you to make the best out of your monies, whether little or much. There's always an element of budgeting. And most people, to be honest, depending on the money personality, they've never budgeted in their lives. They just go along. Why is it so important?
It's very important because, for one, it just gives you an idea of where you're at, how much cash flow is coming in and how much are you spending. So a budget simply means understanding your cash flows. And it also helps you know your habits, because if you look at your cash flows, it will teach you about your own habits. Yes.
And how best would you budget?
Okay. If it comes to budgeting 101, if you've never drawn up a budget, then the first thing you'd do is divide it into 60% for needs and 40% for wants. So needs would be, of course, food, shelter, the basic needs, right? And then wants would actually involve saving, investing, emergency, insurance, and things like that. Yes.
Okay, so now when we're talking about the budgeting, the 60% for the needs,
yes,
you've talked about the basics.
Yes.
Now, basics look different for different people. So as long as you're not beyond the 60%, then you're good? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. If you can live within your 60%, it's basically, can you live within your 60%? Then moving forward, the 40% goes into the things you desire to do. Yes.
Okay, so is there like a limit? For example, if I'm using 20% of a 60% you've talked about on food, is that something that I'm overdoing, or it's reflective of my circumstances?
Well, different people have different responsibilities. So that's why that is just the basic budget. So if you have children, for example, things like school fees will still have to come from the 60%. So you can't have 20% in food and then you don't have anything for school fees. So basically, it's just a standard that you have to have your rent, or if you have a mortgage, or if you have school fees, as I said, shelter, fuel, all those things, groceries, electricity, they should be captured in the 60%.
And when you're drawing up your budget, are you drawing it against your gross or your net?
Your net. Yes.
And in this case, does it apply for both employees and those in business, or how do you calculate this?
Yes, even those in business. And even when I teach or train entrepreneurs, I always ask them to separate profit from income, because many entrepreneurs actually decide that all the profit is their income. But that's not the case. They must also draw a salary from the profit, so that they also draw the budget now out of that salary. Yes.
And somebody is thinking, okay, fine, I've also heard about budgeting and was told the little pocket money I got from campus, from my parents and all that, I could have started from there. Is it possible to actually do so with so little?
It is. You know, when we look at the budget as 100%, it's 100% of 1,000 shillings, 100,000 shillings, 1,000,000 shillings. So whatever amount, if you're beginning at the basics, you can start with that, even the 1,000 shillings. Yes.
Okay, so let's define needs versus wants. Again, I said these sound or are different to different people. Let's make it clear. What are needs in this case?
So needs are, even your work is part of your needs, because you need to work to make money. So if your work involves a shop or equipment, then your needs would be part of that. So your fuel, your food, your shelter, your electricity, all those things are part of needs. Those ones are your needs.
So your expenses are part and parcel of a 60%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, wants define things you can live without.
Yes.
Explain.
Yes. So wants are, like I said, the desires. So you say saving and investing are part of wants, because they are not part of, you've already covered your needs. So now saving and investing would come from that. An emergency fund would come from that. Insurance would come from that. And even entertainment would come from that. Yeah.
Okay, so remember our question of the day this morning is, how do you ensure your financial stability and growth? Remember that hashtag is a new normal, even as we try to understand where you're at and also get to hear from Christine in how best we can make use of our monies. And as she said, it doesn't matter how much it is. What matters is that you have an understanding to ensure what you have works for you. And speaking of which, we have some of that feedback already coming through. And we have Darwin Sounds who says, I just focus my mind on becoming the greatest. This accelerates me and saves my day, not emptying my accounts, but rather finding more avenues to credit them. Thank you, Darwin. We have Zablon Kanono who says poultry farming is what he has invested in to keep himself afloat. At the Mwangi says, I tried investing in crypto. Initially, I was skeptical, but it turned out to be something worthwhile. And I think Christy will be touching on this even as we touch on investments. And Cavani Julia says insurance saving schemes. Christine has mentioned this. She will delve further into it in a moment. Danny254 says, I invest in crypto coins. Interesting. This is the second person saying this. And the last one for now, just as Motoroki says, Chama. Interesting, Justice. Thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of people resonate in saving in things like chamas and all that. So even as we think about the budgeting, and we know it's 60%, 40%, how now can you track your expenses? Because I think this is where now people get lost in. All right. You start off with all the best intentions, but somehow life overtakes you. And then the percentages get jumbled up.
The best thing is that now there are so many apps that we can do this with. But even if you don't have a smartphone, the most rudimentary way is just to have a notebook and to just walk around with it on your person for 1 month, tracking everything that you spend your money on. That's the easiest way. And then after that, you can analyze and say, do I do this every month, or maybe this is only in this season? And that's the most rudimentary way. But the apps are now available for that.
All right. So are you talking about me putting together an Excel sheet for those ones who can tabulate an Excel sheet, or literally saying, today I ate ugali, I bought bread, I bought milk, and this is how much it costed me?
Yes, that way. As rudimentary as that, with a notebook. Yeah.
Okay. And these expenses, do they vary depending on perhaps your source of income or how many sources of income you have?
Not really, because what happens is you're just tabulating everything. You're capturing everything and recording it. So even if you have multiple sources of income, as long as you're capturing all the information, it will work.
Now, there are those who say, I will spend this because I know there's some money coming somewhere from somewhere. And then perhaps at times it works out, at times you find yourself in a hole.
Yeah.
What is the rule of thumb when it comes to expenses?
Work with what you already have at hand, not with what you're expecting, because there are delays. And especially in this season, a lot of people are employed, yes, but their salaries are getting later and later and later. I'm meeting clients whose salaries are coming in towards the end of the month instead of at the beginning of the month. So work with the cash at hand. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Now, we have some people who have said they save a lot and that's what keeps them afloat. And when things go wrong, they go back into that jar, you know, that piggy bank.
Yeah.
Is it advisable to do so?
Yes, it's when you have it as an emergency fund. So when it comes to budgeting or to financial planning, everything has its category. So if you have an emergency fund, which should be at least 5% of your gross income that you keep away for 6 months, then that is what you can dip into in these periods where you need extra money.
So 5% of your gross income.
Yes, for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
All right. So now if things are thick, like the season we're in, now you can put your...
Yes, you can dip into that.
And how much of it can you take out?
Well, it's for the season. So for many people, I would say try and start something else with that. If you can, use that as a kitty to start something else that gives you income, rather than keeping on dipping and finishing it, because the season is long. It's already been almost a year and a quarter since COVID hit. So yes, start something else that will actually add you another source of income. There
are those who are asking, okay, fine, now this is what I'm working with. The pandemic has come, it's hit us, things are a little bit different. Do I let go of what I'm into or I have invested in terms of businesses and what have you, and perhaps relook how my expenditure looks like? What do you do? Do you let go? Do you harness what you have?
I would say, I should have mentioned at the beginning that when it comes to financial planning, we need to have what I would call a committee of experts, like we did when the Constitution was being drawn up. These are people who are like mentors or even friends who have experience. So you sit down with these people and explain the situation and say, look, this is what has happened. My business hasn't been making any profit. What should I do? So we should always have someone who's an expert in your field that you can always talk to. So yes, in that area, yes, you would look at how many expenses can you cut out? How can you, cut back? All those things. But you must have a network of experts who help you and advise you.
Okay. Yeah. And most of us will perhaps just get into a cocoon when things are think and think, shida ni yangu, I will not tell whoever else is looking in. Let's go back to somebody who's mentioned that they actually ensure that they keep their heads above water by being part of a chama. Which brings us back to, okay, fine, you have a little money, but a little of it goes somewhere, which is your savings. Yeah. How or what is the rule of thumb when it comes to savings?
Okay, so if it's, again, beginners, start with 10% of your income. If you're a shrewd investor, some of them go up to 30% because shrewd investors tend to live on much less than what they make. But if you're beginning, you start at 10% of your income.
Yes. So 10% of what? Gross or net?
That is of your gross. Yes.
So let me understand this, and I think this is what most people get lost in. You said 60% of your net goes to your needs and 40% goes to your wants or things that you can savings and all that. But then again, when you're calculating the savings and expenses, it should be tallied against your gross.
Yes.
Why?
Because gross is based on your income, and saving is a way of paying yourself in the future. So in the same way you've been paid for the present work you're doing, you should also pay yourself for the future. That's why we look at gross, which is why even pensions are calculated on gross. Your employer, all those benefits you get are calculated on gross because they're paying you for your present work, but now you're investing in your future. Yes.
Let's break it down to those that feel, okay, fine, this conversation is beyond me because I've so little coming in, especially in this pandemic.
Yes.
And perhaps somebody is taking home 1,000 shillings. What would you suggest?
1,000 shillings, it is a tough space because
a tight one.
As we already know, taxes are being increased. There's going to be taxes on the fuel, there's taxes on gas and things like that. So cost of living is going up, meaning inflation is going up. I would just say you'd have to look at maybe where you live. Can you move to a cheaper place? Can you walk instead of taking a matatu to work? There are just different ways where you'd have to cut back because 1,000 shillings really won't stretch very far, especially if you're in the city. But I would just say that chamas, like you've mentioned, are a wonderful way of saving because with chamas, you have dividends, first of all, at the end of every year, and then you can also acquire enough savings to borrow and now start something. I think I just want to keep emphasizing that we should have already started something. They normally say the best time to start something was yesterday or today. So to start something that generates you an income. So with that 1,000 shillings, you just have to minimize all your expenses in that area.
And this is just an example of the people who have to deal with a very, very little income coming in. It could be 1,000, 5,000 and all. But the idea here is to show that whatever little you have, it is possible.
Yes.
Because as somebody once challenged me, if the woman in the mashinani, if the woman in the informal settlement, wherever she is, can actually make or build or buy land out of that table banking she's part of, how about you?
Exactly.
So,
we don't have excuses.
Yeah. So what is the rule here when it comes to such? Because it looks like this person has so little, but they still can manage to make such great investments.
So the rule is for that person, and we have so much to learn from them. They don't eat out, for example. There's no such thing. They eat organically. They eat from their own land, from their own farms. They walk great distances. They don't take any form of transport. So in those areas, that is why they are able to harness even that 1,000 shilling and multiply it. So for us, it is to really look back at our expenses and see, do I really need to do this? Things like personal care. If you go to the salon every month, maybe it's time to go every 3 months or even every 4 months. So we have to look at all those expenses that seem to be needs, but they're not. Yes.
Okay. And there's somebody who is asking, help me understand how when the rest of us are trying to tighten our belts, somehow there are people who are full in bars. Where do they get the money from? So is this another way of perhaps using money that you don't even have?
For some, yes. For some, they are living on credit. Yeah. They're living on the margins of life and they're living on credit. For others, they may have multiple sources of income. And that's why they're able to spend all their disposable income in a bar or in a social gathering. So I think that's the difference.
We just came off a story that put across I think the reality that most Kenyans are facing, debt, yes, just to make ends meet, whether yes, it's by Shylocks or you're getting your debt or rather your monies from the banks or the Chama or the Sacco. Talk about, again, the rule of thumb when it comes to debt.
Okay, so debt can be good and bad. So bad debt would be towards something that is for consuming, a consumer item. Good debt would be something that is an asset. And an asset is something that either gives you an income or acquires value over time. So that is the main difference between good and bad debt. So for anyone seeking a loan or access to credit, whatever you'd like to call access to that money, is it good or bad? Those are the two ways to look at it. And then the rule is, in terms of repayment, it shouldn't be more than 30% of your income in terms of repaying back that loan. So for some of these, like the mobile app loans, the interest rate is so high. So what is it versus what you're paying back? And then if it's for business, then if you're repaying 30%, then your business needs to be making another 20% on top of that. So at least 50% return on your loan for you to take that loan and get a 30% repayment.
So Christine, at this point, I think it's prudent that we give practical examples of what we mean by a good debt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you run a business, and in that business, say you have a bakery, and you need to increase the ovens in that bakery. So buying different ovens is actually, out of a loan, is actually good debt, because that is an asset you're adding to your company, and it will also make your company more efficient. When it comes to farming, same thing. You could be buying a tractor. You need a loan to buy the tractor. That tractor, instead of hiring a tractor every season, you're able to own your own tractor. So those are some of the things we can call a good debt. Even buying land, if it's for lease or for some other farming activity, again, that would be a loan for a good debt.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And bad debts?
Bad debts for parties, weddings, furniture, and such.
Yes. Okay, it's interesting that you talk about things like furniture and weddings. People would think these are important things, but then again, if you think about what it's giving you, that's where now the difference is. Yes. You're not getting anything out of it apart from the ceremony, right?
Yes, at all.
Now, let's go back to now somebody who's raking in a little bit of money on a daily and perhaps is falling short, especially in this season. And they are taking loans just to, literally put food on the table. How would you advise such a person? How much can you go or how much can you take?
It's a really tough season, and this is really something facing so many people. Once again, 30%. If they're going to take any money, they must take at least, or rather a maximum of 30% of their income to repay it back, even if it's for food. Because once you take more than that, then it means even if your income is delayed slightly, you won't be able to fulfill your needs, and on top of that you won't be able to pay the loan either, and your interest will get higher. Mm-hmm. So you'll be in a vicious cycle. So to avoid that vicious cycle, you keep it down to 30%.
Yeah. All right. And there's somebody else who actually mentioned the fact that they have been putting their monies in insurance savings schemes. Is this something that you would advise? And this is actually Kaveni Julius from Uganda.
Okay. So insurance is a controversial subject sometimes because some people hate insurance with a passion. Some people love insurance with a passion. Insurance companies have amazing products, but you have to seek them out. They have amazing pension plans. They have amazing investment plans. They even have unit trusts. And some of these are the best ways you can save because the interest is good, and on top of that, it's a well-known company, an established company that you're sure will be around for another 50 or so years. So I would say, yes, investigate. They are wonderful products. and you go ahead and save in the insurance companies as well.
Uh-huh. And there's somebody who is actually asking, okay, let's just take you back to the savings. So you can put in insurance schemes, but also you can put in that bank account where you just put in the money and it sits there. Is there any value in putting money in the bank?
The bank is there as a facility. So if you're putting in your money for a certain purpose, yes. But again, you should make your money work for you. And in the bank, the interest is minimal. So minimal money in the bank, have the rest working for you in another investment.
So if I am, shopping around for the right bank to put in my money, what should I look out for?
Banking, I should also say there's two strategies for investing. There's conservation and growth. If you're a conservative person, then you will go for a bank or even a money market in terms of a treasury bill or a treasury bond. But again, minimal. When you look at a bank account, it's there as a facility, but not really as an investment. I wouldn't say an account is an investment. However, for your day-to-day, you have your running bank account for your business and for all those things. Look out for high interest rates. Look out for no monthly charges for things like transfers and ATM fees and over-the-counter fees. Those are the things to look out for.
Okay, and for those that actually offer things like fixed deposit accounts, is this something lucrative?
For conservative investor, yes, because a conservative investor has a lump sum and all they want is to conserve with an opportunity for interest. So an opportunity for interest could be 7% or 8%. For anyone else who is more aggressive, that would be too low. So they would be looking for 13, 14, or 15%. Yes.
Okay, and still on the savings, you talked about having an emergency fund.
Yes.
Where is this money kept? Is it in a bank? Is it in a market fund? Where do you put this in?
For that, I would advise things like a unit trust. Now, a unit trust is just a pool of money where different investors come together, and that pool of funds now invests in shares, in treasury bills, in fixed deposit, even in forex. And the negotiating power of a unit trust is much higher than if you were to go individually. And the best thing about unit trust, the minimums are 1,000 shillings to invest. Yes.
Now, somebody is saying, please speak about chamas because these are closer home, and we'll get to that in a moment. But remember, our question of the day to you is, what have you been doing, or what do you do to ensure your financial stability and growth? That hashtag is new normal. And of course, you can reach us using those numbers at the bottom of your screen. If you can have some of that feedback on screen. We have Jared Martin who says, when I'm broke, I go to my savings box, I break the top, collect all my little savings, then sell it back and restart saving again. That's called financial stability. Is it really? Well, Christine will tell us. Irene's concierge says, budgeting, prioritizing and living below one's means. Okay, Irene, thank you for sharing. Atula Benjamin says, by ensuring that you have a good hustle that can survive all seasons. Atula, we hear you. Good advice. Fred Momanyi, by saving 20% of my income to raise enough capital to open a business. I guess Fred there has caught on the fact that saving, they're not doing 30%, but at least they're doing 20%. You said actually we need to do 10%.
10% to begin.
To begin.
Yes.
So 20% for Fred is really
excellent.
Good. Good one. Now, for the person who is saying they keep going back to the savings box, you said earlier on the savings is supposed to come in for you at such a time.
Yes.
But how much is that financial stability for anyone?
No, but congratulations to him for having the savings box in the first place. Yeah. He's better than most people.
Yes.
When you have a savings box, the temptation is very high. And when it comes to finances, you need to remove the temptation by hiding the money even from yourself, meaning don't have the savings box. Put it in something that has different processes to get into so that it's a deterrent.
So we stop this under the mattress banking.
Unless you have superior willpower.
Okay, the probability of dipping into it is very high. Okay, so back to the chamas. Many people say this is where they actually save up and they get the monies that they need to do whatever projects. Rule of thumb.
Chamas are excellent. I belong to a chama myself. I've seen it work for me. Chamas are they're just like having a financial circle that is close to you. And because they know you, access to funds, if you need funds for a business, for example, are there. And the best thing about chamas is also the interest you earn every year of dividends, because when people take loans, that interest comes out to you as dividends. So for chamas, go all out. I won't even give any rules for that. Just join. Yeah.
Okay, but are we talking about the merry-go-round one? You know, the one I give you money, then somebody collects at the end of a month. Which one works best?
The merry-go-round is not what I'm calling the chama. The chama is an investment group where people save every month into the group. So every person saves, and people only access their money for different purposes, not ad hoc. So those are the ones I'm talking about.
So does this equate to the table banking we were talking about, that we see those women in the mashinani that buy land and build property, and you wonder?
Yes, exactly the same. The chamas, the table banking are all the same. Yes.
Now, going back to how much you can put into it, some of these people come from a very kidogo economy, you know, where they literally put in 20 shillings, 100 shillings and all that. What exactly should you look into when you're joining a chama? Because you've said there are no caveats here, but then again, you've got to think about people that are perhaps thinking like you are, and what else?
You have to look at the term of the chama. Some people have a 5-year term on their chama. Others, it's a lifelong chama. So how long will this chama run? And what is the mission? Are we going to buy land? Are we going to be investing, then sell the investment, divide the profits? So you look at what is the purpose, what is the agenda of this chama, and how long will this chama run? And even the structures. Chamas need to have structures in place, because unfortunately, if a member passes away and there are no structures, then what happens to their funds? Do they have a next of kin? Do they have a proxy that is already fixed into the structure of the constitution of the chama? So those are some of the things to look at.
All right. Now, you touched a little bit about the investment, actually a lot of it, and touched on the various aspects that you can dip your money into, and of course look at what you get in return. And we know the NSE has always been open. Is this something that you would actually suggest, or does it go back to if you're conservative or?
Yes, it always starts with conservative or growth strategy. However, with the investing, it's to diversify. So yes, you live in Kenya, invest in Kenya. Invest in the NSC, you open up a CDSC account and you invest. If that looks troubling to you, every bank can do it for you. Every single bank has an investment arm. You just go to them, you fill a form, and they can invest in the stocks for you as well. Yes.
How else can you also dip yourself in such? Because I understand there are companies, even investment companies, that do this?
Yes. So even the insurance companies do this. The banks do this as well. The investment houses that do this as well. The investment brokers, insurance brokers, and even stock brokers who do this. But if you feel you don't have that courage, you can actually just talk to your bank and they do it for you. Yes.
All right. And perhaps you can help us understand by defining exactly what these are, starting off with money market funds. What exactly is it?
Okay. So money market fund is a unit trust. Like I mentioned earlier, it's in the pool of funds. But if we're talking of the money markets, that would be treasury bills and treasury bonds, which are an investment where you loan the government money at fixed interest over a term. Yes.
Okay, and what are equity funds?
Okay, so equity funds again goes back to the unit trusts. So there's in unit trusts, there are 3 categories. There's equity funds, which is mainly investing in stocks. Then we have money markets, which mainly invests in fixed deposit and treasury bills and bonds. And then balanced, which is a combination of the two. Yeah.
Now, all of these sound very removed from the common mwananchi as far as investment is concerned. And to be honest, when they started off, such large amounts were needed for you to dip your toe into it.
Yes.
Has that changed?
It has really changed. Gladys, it used to be 500,000 to invest in these unit trusts. Right now, it's 1,000 shillings.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell us more.
You just, in fact, since COVID, most of these unit trusts have gone digital. So all you need to do is fill out a form, send your ID, send a copy of your PIN, and M-Pesa. And that's it.
And who are we dealing with in this case?
I don't want to mention the companies.
Okay, not the companies, but are we talking about insurance companies, investment companies?
All of the above. All of the above. Insurance companies, there are more than 18 that have unit trusts. Yes.
Okay, interesting. There's somebody else who's asking, the bond funds, is that the same as the equity funds, or these
That's
are totally
more
different?
of the money market funds.
The money market
Yes.
funds. All right. Now, as we put in the money, as you're saying, you have to look at what gives you the best. And it takes us back to insurance. And somebody is asking, they have that insurance that gives you retirement, health, education policy, and all that. What are those called, and are they lucrative?
I would say separate insurance from investing. So when you have health insurance, it's health insurance. If it's a life insurance cover, life insurance cover. And then if you're going for an investment in the insurance company, let it be a pure investment. Yes.
And for somebody who's already gone in as such, is it possible to pull back and say, okay, fine, separate these things for me?
Only if your policy allows that in terms of the surrender value. There's something called a surrender value, which is what the value of your policy at that point in time. If the surrender value is 100%, you can pull, you can decide to invest in something else, because it's always good to diversify. If not, you carry on with the policy.
Okay, so are you saying if I've been in something for many years and I'm telling them, okay, fine, I'm relooking at my investment and I'd like you, with the money that I've given you, separate what goes into my health insurance and what goes into my investment? That could be a problem, or it looks different for different companies?
It looks different for different companies, and the term from the outset of your own policy. So if your term is a 20-year term, your year 12, you'd have to see where year 12 leaves you in terms of the surrender value.
And now that these insurance, I think you call them endowment plans?
Yes.
Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
And there are many people who took them up when they had their children, because they believe by the time they are going to high school, they'll be in a good place to be able to pay for their education going forward.
Yes.
Education policies. What is the rule of thumb with this?
The best thing about endowment plans is the discipline, because it instills a discipline that you're saving for a distant goal, and you have to be committed to it, because even missing 2 or 3 payments, you incur a penalty. There are so many pros and cons when it comes to endowment plans, because the first thing you look at is how much are you putting in and how much are you getting out. For some endowment plans, you actually don't get more than 2% over what you've put in over the 20 years. So when you get into an endowment plan, always look at what will you get out at the end of it versus what you've put in over the term. Apart from that, as I said, the discipline is really, really good. It encourages even other savings avenues, because once you know you have an endowment plan, you feel like you can dabble more in more adventurous investments. Yeah.
Okay, now you talked about the conservative, investor and the growth investor. Let's talk about the growth investment. What does that entail?
Growth is a more adventurous investor. That's a person who doesn't mind volatility. That's a person who, when they see their stocks going down by 30%, they sleep very well at night. So it is the attitude it's the risk attitude towards investing, and that's the way they look at it. Yes.
So are we talking about the guys who go into real estate and such huge investments?
I wouldn't even say real estate. It's more the Forex. Forex is a high risk, high return sort of investment. The crypto that has been mentioned here today, and different more adventurous futures, things like futures, which is also a highly adventurous. People who invest in gold and silver securities, crude oil directly, diamonds. Those are people who are high appetite. They have high appetite for risk. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, we'll get more about that in a moment. I understand we have a Rebecca on the line from Nairobi. Thank you for calling. Please reduce the volume on your television.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, what's your question?
My name is Rebecca, and we have a group, and it is very interesting that we have discussed about what will help follow when you are forming a group. How can we get in touch with Madam so that she can get in touch with our group and educate them how they can go about what she's discussing about?
Okay. So this group is a chama, right?
Yeah.
Is this a chama?
Yes, it is a chama.
How long have you been in it?
We have been in it for about 5 years.
5 years.
And we don't have anything to do with what we are discussing. We are discussing one stage, we don't move, we just go merry-go-round.
Ah, okay. All right. Thank you, Rebecca, for calling in. So again, we go back to the chamas and the intentions for the same. So how would you advise such a person?
I would say Rebecca and her group need to sit down and look at their goal. What was their goal at the very beginning? Was it really a merry-go-round, or do they have other goals to do with their future? Maybe to retire on a certain income, to buy land, whatever it is. They need to look back and find out what was their original goal, and then agree on the way forward and agree on diversifying that money. Yes.
And are there, I don't know, mentors or teachers out there, or, you know, courses that you can take to perhaps help you along? Because she's saying what you're saying, she's hearing for the first time and they've not been able to achieve any of
Yes. There's always YouTube University. There's so many resources.
Yeah.
If she's able to go on YouTube, there are very many resources out there. As I said earlier, there's that committee of experts. So maybe Rebecca needs to look around her for a network of someone else who's had a successful chama and what they're doing. And then just interact with that person. There are also groups on Facebook. There are groups for farmers, there are groups for agribusiness. There's so many different resources that could be there that maybe could attract a group like Rebecca. So there's so many sources. Of course, she could also come to me.
Okay. All right. Now, we take a short break. When we come back, somebody is saying, let's talk about SACCOs, to join or not to join. Christine will tell us more about that in a moment. But for now, we take a short break on Your World. We'll be back even as we relook your financial health. Stay with us.
Mzing ni aje? Nataka jo kujiuliza mjamaa jo alidiscover jo sambu inafaa ikuwe na kona 3. Samosa.
Imedu nini?
Inakuwaga na kona 3 sana, shindwa kwani hata discover ya kona 4 lini.
Mzingwe zimekuraru.
Acha hiyo triangle atafuta hata kama ni pentagon.
To get samosa, dial *811*928#. Skiza na Nation. Along came love.
Yeah? So now you just want to get rid of me.
I'm trying to explain my side here so you can understand. But don't you worry, because the next time I won't say anything. And you can be blissfully ignorant. Haven't you done enough damage to me that you have to come here and threaten me as well?
I've done you damage? That's an understatement, one. My only mistake was believing that you were my friend and you were not.
I no longer care about what you say, David. I'm not afraid of you.
I will never rest until I see you rotting in jail.
Do whatever you want, man.
Along came love.
Each bowl of Nestle Ceregrow contains the goodness of cereals and nutrition your child needs to blossom. That's one less thing to worry about. Nestle Ceregrow. It's all good, Mom.
Next on Ushirika, Mwea Rice Growers Multipurpose Cooperative Society.
Currently, the society has over 7,500 members.
Our asset base is about Kenya shillings 300 million.
Cooperative Bank has given the society a line of 200 million shillings as supply chain finance to enable them take the rice from their members.
Imenisaidia na kusomesha watoto, nimejenga nyumba permanent. Pia baada ya hiyo kuna shilingi inabaki kwa mfuko.
This Tuesday at 6:45 p.m. on NTV.
If there's one thing that all soaps do, it's wash. From buckets to basins,
bathrooms to streams, and everything in between.
All soaps wash.
Yes, but Protex is different. Its reinvented formula with flaxseed oil boosts your skin's natural anti-germ defenses by 10 times more, protecting you against 99.9% of germs. So what keeps us healthy?
Protex.
Protex. Good health starts here.
Try Panadol Advance for relief from headaches, body aches, and fever. With Panadol's Optizorb formula, the tablet gently breaks down in the stomach, quickly absorbs, and starts providing pain relief in 15 minutes. For fast and effective pain relief that you can trust, try Panadol Advance.
Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. This morning, we're joined by Christine Gathwini, who is a financial consultant, even as we take a look at our financial health. And this is something that I think has been underscored by the pandemic. It is so important to relook your relationship with money, because when the wind blows or when that storm comes, it's when you will know how well you have been harnessing your financial stability. So before we get back to that conversation, now that there's so many asking about SACCOs to join or not to join, let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines in your other world. And shopping malls and bars are closed in Tokyo after Japan declared a new virus state of emergency in the capital just 3 months before the Olympics. The new measure came into effect on Sunday and will run until May the 11th. Japan announced a new virus state of emergency in Tokyo and 3 other regions on Friday as the country battles surging infections just 3 months before the Olympic opening ceremony. The nation's virus outbreak remains much smaller than in many countries, but a recent uptick in cases has officials and medical professionals worried, even as the government and Olympic organizers insist this summer's games will go ahead. India battles a catastrophic, record-breaking coronavirus wave that has overwhelmed hospitals and set crematoriums working at full capacity. The country of 1.3 billion has become the latest hotspot of a pandemic that has killed more than 3 million people, even as richer countries take steps towards normality with quickening inoculation programs. The US and Britain rushed ventilators and vaccine materials to India as the country battles a catastrophic, record-breaking coronavirus wave that has overwhelmed hospitals. And a surge in recent days has seen patients' families taking to social media to beg for oxygen supplies and locations of available hospital beds, and has forced the capital, New Delhi, to extend a week-long lockdown. Elsewhere, on April the 28th, Joe Biden will address U.S. Congress to mark 100 days in office as he grapples with critical issues, including the coronavirus pandemic and America's economic woes. Elaine Kamak, a senior fellow at Brookings Institution, says the former senator learned a very important lesson: to under-promise and over-deliver, I beg your pardon, as he surpassed the goal of 100 million coronavirus vaccinations he first set for COVID vaccinations at the beginning of his presidency.
There's no statutory importance to 100 days. There's no constitutional importance. It really is a tradition that began with Franklin Roosevelt, who took office in the middle of the Great Depression and proceeded to give hope to Americans and to enact a flurry of legislation and relief that people were really desperate for. The vaccine rollout was very bumpy, and people thought, oh, that's ridiculous, he'll never do that. Well, it turns out that there are 200 million shots in Americans' arms, and that the vaccine program is going really quite well. So on that metric, he's getting very high marks. His approval ratings average at about 53%, and some are as high as 59%. And in contrast, Trump never in his whole entire 4 years got above 50%.
Staying in the U.S., and U.S. health regulators have full confidence that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine's known and potential benefits outweigh its known and potential risks in individuals 18 years of age and older. The Food and Drug Administration and the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, say Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccinations can't restart after the shot's rollout was paused due to worries over blood clotting.
Based on the in-depth analysis, there is likely an association, but the risk is very low. What we are seeing is the overall rate of events was 1.9 cases per million people. In terms of benefits, we found that for every 1 million doses of this vaccine, the J&J vaccine could prevent over 650 hospitalizations and 12 deaths among women aged 18 to 49. And this vaccine could prevent over 4,700 hospitalizations and nearly 600 deaths among women over 50. These are significant numbers and show the important impact of this vaccine in our country. In the end, this vaccine was shown to be safe and effective for the vast majority of people. For some women under the age of 50, there might be an increased risk of this rare TTS condition. We have 3 safe and effective options for a COVID-19 vaccine in this country. And the J&J is an important vaccine offering key advantages, including its single-dose option and its viability when the supply chain may not allow for freezers.
Back to our conversation of the day. So how is it that there's some people who somehow keep their heads above water no matter the season when it comes to their monies? What is this secret that they have that all of us perhaps need to borrow? Because if there's one season we all have been forced to relook our relationship with money, is this season, even as we collectively face the pandemic. Christine is still with us, and that question as we went to the break is SACCOs, to join or not to join?
SACCOs, again, a wonderful resource. Looking at a SACCO, you look at the number of members they have, and then you look at how long have they been running, how are the members getting their facilities, whether it's for businesses and things like that. Are they shareholders or are they savers? Because for some SACCOs, they call you a saver, so you have savings. For others, they give you shares in the SACCO. There is a risk where it's purely shares, because if the SACCO goes down, you don't actually get your savings, but you're considered a shareholder. So if they're bankrupt, you're just a shareholder of some a bankrupt institution. But when it comes to savings, at least you know, even if things happen, there's liquidity in that SACCO. So SACCOs are an excellent place to save. Again, just like chamas, there's the annual dividends. And on top of that, with SACCOs, if you need a long-term goal, like you need a big purchase in the future, or like a home, or you need a big loan in the future, SACCOs give the lowest interest rates. So you will find SACCOs giving even 1% or 2% annual interest rate on a loan. Yes.
Okay, so are we saying even when you're looking for who to loan from, that perhaps SACCOs is one of the institutions? Are there others that, apart from the banks, you can think of?
Yes. So there's a hierarchy of loans for business. I want to stress for business because, or for an asset. Let me say an asset rather than business. The hierarchy starts with your friends and family. That's the immediate place you should try and look for capital. After that, you look at business associates or professional networks. After that, you look at a microfinance institution, a chama, a SACCO, and finally, the bank. Yes.
And these are according to what you would get the best interest rate,
the best
perhaps?
value. Friends and family probably won't charge you any interest. And then, like I said, with the SACCO, it's very, very low. So the highest would be the bank, and the lowest would be, of course, friends and family.
But then again, there are people who say, hey, never borrow from a friend, utaribu rafiki.
Again, this is based on you're going to earn this back. You're going to develop an income out of this. So you should be confident if you're going to get, you must have your business plan sorted out. You do your projections. For all of the above, you need that, even for the friends and the family, so that they also have confidence that you'll repay them.
Okay, taking you back to the SACCOs, there are some SACCOs that have interesting terms and conditions in as far as joining is concerned. There's some that make it look like for you to join, you have to come with a multitude of people to bring value to the SACCO. There are those when you're in it, there are other terms and conditions when it comes to borrowing. What are these things that you should look out for that shouldn't impede your plan to make money within the institution?
One is the goodwill. For some SACCOs, the goodwill is so high just to join based on the number of years it's been running. So if the goodwill is too high and maybe you only need the money in 1 or 2 years, then that would be something to impede. The guarantors. You always have to be referred when you join a SACCO. So you look at those kind of terms and conditions, and also how many times they have those default issues, because if they have a lot of defaulting, maybe there are some systems that are not in place, and therefore some people are able to guarantee when they're not supposed to guarantee, and that's what causes the default. So you'd have to look at those factors when you're joining a SACCO.
Okay, and we see a lot of SACCOs working, especially in the mashinani. Is it because of that interest rate?
Not really, it's just the discipline. The further you get away from the city, the more people are disciplined with their funds. Just because they don't live for today, they actually live for what they're going to do. If it's farming, they look at, this year I need to produce 3 tons. So it's that futuristic thinking that makes people in the mashinani more disciplined with their funds, because the same SACCO will be in Nairobi with the same interest rate, but the discipline is higher in mashinani. Yes.
Okay. Now, there are some people who said, I've had to start a side hustle. Somebody mentioned starting a side hustle that ensures that you get money coming in even when everything else, goes away. What would you consider when you're starting a side hustle for it to flourish?
Okay, so take at least 3 months doing your research before you start a side hustle. And then look at who would be your client today. If your side hustle was already in existence, who would be your client? And then look for someone similar to that client and pitch. Just see how they receive it, so that you know if there's actually a market for what you're doing. The other thing is, what amount of time are you ready to set aside for that side hustle? It might mean early mornings, late nights, or weekends. And then you look at your why. Why are you getting into that side hustle? Is it for a 1-year need, a 5-year need, income on a monthly basis, a lump sum in 5 years? So those are some of the things you look at.
And even as we think about the side hustle, most people feel that they cannot start something because they don't have the capital it takes to have it. So as you're sourcing where to get the capital, what should you keep in mind?
Once you have done your research and you've done that due diligence, as I said, you approach your friends and your family. Then you look at other places to approach. And then you actually show them there's a market. I've tested the market. Even if it's a survey online, even if it's a Facebook questionnaire, you've already tested the market and you're sure there's actually a need and a niche for you. Then you can go and approach anyone for that capital.
Now we know the chances of any business, not taking off in the first 5 years is very real. So even as you're going to find monies in different places and others even deeping into their savings, what should you consider? How much should you take in? Because at the end of the day, this is a loan you will be stuck with.
The thing about business people or entrepreneurs are highly optimistic. So you always need, again, that committee of experts who are going to correct. If you have a blind spot, they're going to see it and correct it for you so that you don't over-project for your business. It's always better to be on the conservative side. Even if you find you have so much demand for your business, always look at the conservative side, look for experts in that area, even if you have to pay them, even if you have to pay for their time, so that they guide you, because entrepreneurs are highly optimistic. They always see they are going to take over the world. Yes.
And perhaps even where you sit as a financial consultant, I know you've worked with the Kenya Chamber of Commerce. What are you seeing as the thriving businesses, opportunities out there?
Right now, agribusiness in many, many areas is doing very, very well. Tech is always doing well because the future is artificial intelligence and things like that. So when you have any business, you have to incorporate tech and IT for it to flourish and automate, because automation has not been affected by the pandemic. For example, if you have a digital portal which is ongoing and that's maybe how you get your clients, then it's going to thrive. So those are some of the ways. Yes.
So agribusiness and IT rank the highest.
Yeah, for now.
Okay. But of course, they say also when it comes to food, if there's one thing we've seen, people who are locked in have been locked in, but they seem to still eat.
Exactly. Yes. That comes back to agribusiness again. People will always eat. There'll always be a need for that. So that's why I'm saying that's one of the ways you wouldn't go wrong with food. Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about owning assets, okay? Because again, it feels like there are those who have the monies to get into the real estate and it's only for a certain few, buying land and such things. What should somebody consider when they start thinking about taking it to that step, owning an asset?
Okay, so when it comes to real estate, once again, it's what is the purpose for that? Is it a home you're going to live in? Is it something that you're going to lease out? Is it something you're going to build structures on it, and then those structures will be for commercial use or even residential use? And what will those structures be made of? In this age, we have green technology, we have prefab housing, we have all these ways where the cost of building is much, much lower than it used to be. It's probably 10% of what it was. So you look at it, is it farmland? Is it commercial land? Is it residential land? And then the purpose. Is it for speculative purposes where you buy it and then 2 years from now you're offloading it? So those are some of the things to look at. Look at the location. Are there amenities? Is there access to electricity? Is there access to water? Things like that. Yes.
But we are also at a time where especially the real estate business has been hit hard because, I mean, people have had to readjust. Others have moved out of the city. So there's so many houses that are empty today.
Yes.
So is this something that you should always consider in case something like this would happen?
Exactly. And in Nairobi, we're seeing it a lot. Like you're saying, there's oversupply of apartments, high-end apartments. There is demand for low-end single-dwelling housing. So you must look at the demand and actually go out there. Sometimes investors sit back and make decisions in a boardroom, but they haven't gone around the city to see what is actually happening. So it takes a lot of physical investigation for you to find out what is actually the demand. Maybe there's no demand for what I'm offering. Maybe I need to just open up a warehouse, because as things move online, there'll be greater need for warehousing. So I would say you must look at what is the need. Maybe there's no need for high-end. Maybe you go for low-end. Maybe you go for prefab and then move in that direction.
Okay, so would you say generally there is money within the real estate sector?
There is. It is a depressed market, and it was depressed even before COVID hit. But this has, like you said, people have moved out of the city, people are moving to the rural areas. So it's a depressed market for residential and even for commercial as people work from home. So do your research. I would say there are still opportunities, but do your research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now somebody is saying, okay, now that we're even talking about owning assets, there is this need and rush to own a car, yet it is tagged as a depreciating asset. What should you always consider when you're making this investment?
Well, currently, because of working from home, is a car really necessary right now? Maybe not. Otherwise, you could do it for a car hire service if you're going to buy it, so that you can use it as well as hire it out and it earns you an income. Yes.
But on a general, even without the pandemic?
If it's a tool, if your car takes you from point A to B and that earns you money because you're in point B, then you get the car.
If it's just for taking you to work and back home, you shouldn't have it.
It has to make sense. It has to, there's a rate of return on every investment. Is that car giving you any rate of return? Then you calculate it and see whether it's worth it.
And I think at this point then, whether it's a car, it's a motorbike, it's a bicycle that you are buying, it needs to also translate the same way.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Even as we bring this conversation to a close, there is a need to talk about retirement plans, because I don't think anyone wants to look at it. It's like Kenyans and wheels. They feel like they don't need to talk about that. It's too far in the future.
Yes.
What would you say about this?
And thank you for bringing up wheels, because they go together. Have you planned for the transfer of your assets once you pass away? And as well as retirement, have you planned for that season where money is working for you rather than you working for money? Because retirement just means you've attained financial independence. You don't need to work for your money. You can choose to, but you don't need to. So retirement is that goal that, as you said, we don't like to look at it, but it is coming. And sometimes it's early retirement. As we are in a season like this, there's a lot of redundancy. A lot of people are being taken into early retirement. So when I said savings is like investing in your future, retirement is the same thing. As you save and put your money away for retirement and put it at that term, if it's 10, 15 years away, it's for you. It's actually paying yourself in the future. So again, if it's for a rule of thumb, you would start with at least 5% of your income going towards retirement. The older you are, the higher it should be if you're starting out. Yeah.
And where are you putting this money in? In pension schemes? Where?
So, as I mentioned, there are so many pension schemes even offered by insurance companies or investment houses, and they're really, really good. Even the returns, the last 1 year were an average of 9%, even during COVID. So, a pension scheme is not usually very adventurous. It's very conservative. So, getting an 8 or 9% return is pretty good. And yes, you just have a standing order. If you have a personal pension plan, you can do a standing order. Otherwise, you can do it through your employer or get yourself one on your own.
How early should you start putting into your retirement?
As soon as you start working.
Yes. Okay, so do you have to wait until you have that employment, or whenever you start making money, whether it's business or whatever else?
Whenever you start making money. Yes.
Okay, so today again, as you touched on various aspects of financial planning and of course wellness, we were looking or relooking at our financial health. Your parting shot in as far as the relationship we have with money and why some people just seem to make it no matter the season.
Have your committee of experts. Have a network of people who are experts in every area so that every financial decision has an accountability person with you. And then look at cutting down on, as I said, those things that appeared to be needs, but they are actually wants. So those are the two things. And then just look at your goals. Is it a growth strategy or is it a conservation strategy? And then procrastination is your enemy. You won't get anywhere if you don't do anything. So start now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That is Christine Gathrini. She is a financial consultant helping us relook our financial health. And I think that was a very informative conversation, even as we relook the same. And if you'd like to reach out to her, she is on the social media platforms. And of course, if this is something you need to relook with a professional, please do so, because at the end of the day, how you end up in as far as the future is concerned financially is what you do today. Well, at this point, we take another short break on Your World. When we come back, as we know, the pandemic has underscored the important role innovation plays in simplifying day-to-day tasks, which have in turn given many businesses a new list of life. We speak to a CEO and founder of such a business in a moment. Stay with us. Excellent.